Hello everyone and welcome to today's Hasselblad webinar. I'm Mark Whitney, Hasselblad's Photographer Relations Manager, and today's webinar is an interview with Michael Najjar. So just before we meet Michael, just going to go through a few of the normal slides. So just to let everyone know that today's webinar will be recorded. It will be posted up on the Hasselblad YouTube channel a few days after the webinar. So if you'd like to watch it back, you can watch it on there, and we'll also send the link for this as part of the thank you email that you'll receive from us following the webinar. Today's agenda, quite simple, introduction to Michael, and then we're going to be taking a look at two of his projects, his outer space project and his Cool Earth project. As usual, we estimate this to be around about 50 minutes, but we do have quite a lot of images, and Michael has lots of stories and interesting information to go through. So yeah, we'll try and get through it as quickly and as thoroughly as possible, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you'd like to ask any questions, you can use the GoToWebinar control panel on the right hand side, and we have moderators sitting in the background that will feed the questions through, and we'll try and get them into the conversation as we talk about them or at the end. So let's meet Michael. Michael, are you there?
Yes, here I am. Hello, everybody. Hi. Greetings
Hi.
from Berlin.
Yes, so you're based in Berlin. Have you always been from Berlin?
Sorry again, please?
Are you from Berlin originally? Was you born there, or?
No, originally I'm from Heidelberg, which is in the south of Germany, but I moved to Berlin already in '88 to study here. And yeah, since then I'm living and working here in the city.
Okay. So yeah, so we're going to be talking quite a bit about you and your work today, and a lot of it has a space sort of theme to it.
Yeah.
So what is your interest in space? You know, have you always had an interest in space?
Yeah, I had an interest in space as ever, since ever. So since I was a little boy, of course, I grew up with Star Trek and Starship Enterprise. So that's of course something that's a topic that in my generation, I think most people have, with what we grew up with, all that Apollo era. So it's yeah, it's something that is, I think, from the very early days on, these fascination. Yeah.
Okay, and just to let everyone know, we've got your website address there and your Instagram handle. So if people would like to see more of your work and find out more about you after the webinar, obviously they can find more about you there.
Yeah.
And we'll repeat that again at the end if you haven't got a chance to note it down just yet. So just talking generally about your work, you know, how would you describe yourself as a photographer?
Well, first of all, I would say I'm an artist working with photography. I think that's a little different, but quite an important difference, because I do very conceptual artwork and using photography as a medium of artistic expression. In the artwork that I'm doing, I take a critical look at the technological forces which are shaping and transforming our century. So the photographic and also the video artworks that I do are based on a very interdisciplinary understanding of art. So in my art practice, I fuse in my practice, I fuse art, science, and technology into visions of future social structures which might emerge under the impact of these new cutting-edge technologies.
Okay, so let's before we take a look a little bit more detail into your work. So obviously, as a Hasselblad webinar, it would only be right to talk about the tool of your trade. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your history of using Hasselblads.
Well, I have a long history of using Hasselblad, because in '88, when I started as a young student here at the Art University, and I studied media art. That means I studied photography, video, and computer animation. And in these early days, I started to work with the Hasselblad cameras. So at the time, of course, the analog cameras, the 500 cm with a 6x6 films, and that was a camera that really was part of my entire student life and work, and then also after university when I started to work as a professional artist and photographer. And then, of course, when at the very beginning, when Hasselblad started to switch over to digital cameras, I think the first one was the H4D, which I already started also to use. So over the time, I really have every digital model also that came out, and I couldn't imagine to work with something else.
Okay, and your current camera is what we're showing on the screen there, the H6D-100.
Yeah, that's the H6D. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have quite an interesting or funny story about your first use of the H6D? If you could tell us that.
Yeah. When the H6D came out, I was very privileged being one of the 10 photographers worldwide who got the first cameras to test, and that was right when I was on a production in Iceland. So I got one of these brand new H6Ds to take with me to shoot in Iceland. And in Iceland, the conditions, especially in winter, are extremely rough. And we shot on the beach, where suddenly a monster wave came, and I was very dangerous. And at that moment, really, the question was me or the camera. So then I decided to save myself. So a massive wave came, and the camera was taken by the wave and fall into the sea and was destroyed. Yeah, we grabbed it out of the water, we got it back, but due to the salt water, it was destroyed. Yeah. So it was quite embarrassing.
Water and cameras don't mix very well, but yeah. Okay, so let's start taking a look at your outer space project. So it started in 2011.
Yeah.
Still ongoing. So tell us a little bit more about the project.
Yeah, I will. So the Outer Space series, which I began in 2011, deals with the latest developments in space exploration and the way how these developments will shape our future life on Earth, in Earth near orbit, and also on other planets. As you know, and maybe have heard that today's finally launched the Artemis 1 mission, what now paves the way to bring us back to the moon. So I started with a series on another very historic launch like the one today, about 10, 11 years ago, when the last launch of an American space shuttle happened. So the Atlantis mission in July 2011. So that was the last mission of the shuttle, and that was the end of the shuttle era. And it was clear that something new is gonna happen. So that was the kind of the beginning of a civilian space development. And civilization now will more expand into space. We will see also an industrialization of the geolunar space. We will have different systems of civil passenger transportation, accommodations in space. So all these new developments will have a strong impact on humanity's future. And for me personally, it was so mind-blowing when I saw this shuttle launching that I said, I definitely have to work on that topic. And also, I definitely want to be myself one day in such a shuttle and go up into space.
Okay, well, that leads us on nicely to this next slide. So you will be as part of the Virgin Galactic project.
Yeah. As usually as an artist, I'm very much, I have a very hands-on approach. That means physically, I'm very much involved in what I'm doing. My artistic creation is based on my own personal and also physical experience. So when I started to work on the topic of space exploration, when I did all the research, I very quickly realized that everybody is fascinated about space exploration. Nobody was there. So nobody has a real personal experience. Nobody. There is a small group of about, I think today, about 507 astronauts who launched into space, but that's really a tiny, tiny percentage of the human population on the planet. So That's not an experience that really many people have, but I needed that for creating artwork. So I came up, or I found the project of Virgin Galactic, and at the time they offered a new construction of a new spaceship with transportation into space for civilians. So I got in touch with them, and at the end I bought a ticket for one of their launches, and I became one of their pioneer astronauts. Yes.
Wow. Okay, and is there any estimate as to when that flight may be yet?
Well, that has a massive delay since years now, the same like the Artemis mission for the moon. And but one day these things going to happen. So we're positive now. The information that we have for now is that by Q2, so about early summer next year, the first civilian launches will take place. And I'm one of the pioneer astronauts. That means I will fly within the first year of operation. So if everything goes super well, I might fly by the end of next year. Yeah.
Okay, and you've been doing some training to prepare yourself for this flight. So see from this image here that you've taken your Hasselblad along the way. Yeah, so tell us a bit about what training you're undergoing.
Yeah, once I became one of Virgin Galactic's pioneer astronauts, I said, I also want to know how professional astronauts prepare for launching into space. What do they have to do? What trainings do they have to do? How do they have to prepare mentally and physically for bringing their body for traveling into space? And that's why at the time then I approached the Russian space agency, and I asked them for permission to train with the cosmonauts and astronauts and do a space training there. As you can imagine, I didn't get an immediate yes, you were welcome. So it took me about a year of conversation, thousands of emails, phone calls, and convincing them to give me access and let me in and train with the cosmonauts. So finally I got that permission, and I was allowed to go to Star City and do their space training. What we see here is my underwater spacewalk training. So that means that you do that for simulating work in a zero-G or microgravity environment. So they have a massive hydrolab there, where there's a one-to-one full-scale mock-up of the International Space Station, so the Russian module, and there you train in that EVE spacesuit to move your body in a spacesuit in a zero-G environment. And here you see the mock-up of the module of the International Space Station, and that's me inside that astronaut suit, trying to fulfill my my training targets, my training goals. It's very heavy, the whole suit. It's about 150 kilograms. So I was taken out then with a crane from the water. We had other photographers and video cameramen underwater with me to shoot footage then, which I later could use for artistic creation then.
Okay, and also some flying experience as well.
Yeah, the heaviest way to train G-forces, what is very important, is a flight in a jet fighter. So I was allowed to perform a flight in a MiG-29, and we flew with almost twice the speed of sound into the stratosphere, so up to 20,000 meters, and that was a 1-hour flight to cope with the extreme G-forces. And I think we have a little video prepared what gives the best impression of what I had to cope with during that flight. So here you see me in the cockpit of that jet fighter. We had several cameras in the cockpit to shoot video footage for an artistic video that I later created. based on that flight, I had to cope with a maximum of 7 Gs. That means 7 times your own body weight sits on you. So that's enormous pressure, and the G forces are coming from all sides, up, down, left, right. Here now the boosters are on, and it goes up to 20,000 meters altitude. So that was really a massive and I have to say very stressful experience. Another another possibility to train the G-forces are centrifuges. And I did a lot of centrifuge training. Here you see me at the German Space Center, which also allowed me to do training stuff there. And here is a short arm centrifuge where they spin you around, and then you have to cope with massive G-forces.
Yeah. So this is obviously the first time you've been subject to such G-forces. You know, how nervous were you, or you know, you must be quite sort of brave and like a bit of a daredevil to be able to do these things.
Well, with all these trainings and extreme things, I have to say I'm not so nervous about the training because I know that I work with professional people. Mm-hmm. And there's also for the centrifuge things, for example, there's a very intensive medical survey also, which they're all checking your body functions, and that's rather not so much what scares me. What scares me really is that the cameras work, because these things have a long preparation. Normally, I only get one possibility to do this. There are a lot of people involved, and it's prepared for month and month. And my responsibility is that the cameras work. And normally I can't repeat it. For the spacewalk training underwater, we prepared that for half a year. There were 40 people involved, so there was only one chance to do that. So I'm very much focused on getting my footage, and that prevents me from thinking too much about things that could go wrong during these trainings.
Okay, and a skydive?
Yeah, well, that's a massive or extreme skydive. It's a so-called halo jump. So what I thought, what better could you do to feel the forces of gravity than falling from an extreme height towards the surface of the Earth? And so what I did in the US, I did a military jump, which is called halo jump, high altitude, low opening, and I jumped out of a plane in an altitude of 10,000 meters and with 2 minutes of free fall. So we had 3 cameramen in the air with several equipped with different cameras. I had 7 cameras on my own body to shoot the footage, and then I was falling 2 minutes with 300 kilometers per hour down towards the surface, and that was a massive experiment. And we shot really fantastic footage. We had a precise choreography, what kind of footage had to be shot during that fall, and that was really an amazing experience.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite an extreme action cam on the helmet there as well, with the red. So yeah, the footage.
Yeah. That's all custom made for that. So we prepared all the helmets and the cameras, and also it was not easy to find a cameraman who could do this jump.
Yeah. Okay, so to get to the artworks, so this is an example of how some of your artworks are exhibited.
Yeah, here we have an installation view from one of the exhibitions, an exhibition that I did in Germany at the Wittgenstein Innovation Factory. So there was a very big installation there. And here you have an idea how the artworks look. I work normally with very large formats. These are the largest formats that I do. These are 180 by 280 centimeters. And also of course, to achieve these extreme large formats in a massive or in a perfect resolution and quality, it's absolutely important for me to work with the best camera that can do that. And with the H6D with the 100 megapixels, that provides me enough resolution to go through these big formats in a perfect quality.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so to zoom in on one of the images, so tell us a bit more about this one.
So this artwork is entitled Liquid Gravity, and that's a piece that is based of the spacewalk training that we talked before, and that was shot in underwater in 12 meters depth in that huge hydrolab. And it shows also it shows the way how I work as an artist and photographer, because I'm never interested in straight photography, or I'm never interested in showing reality. I'm always interested in the construction of reality. So my work is always what I call it is hybrid photography. That means it's always oscillating on a thin line between simulation and reality. It mixes different sources, different elements. So it's always a digital composition of different sources that I bring together. So it's digital collage work that I normally do. So here, for example, you see at first glance it looks very real or realistic when you look at the astronaut and the industrial environment, but then you have one element which is added, and that's here the Earth. And of course, if you look at the Earth, that changes your viewpoint, because then as a viewer, you are catapulted yourself into space, and then you have to question, where are you as a viewer, and where is this environment, and how real is this environment?
Yeah. And again, showing the scale of your images here with this installation.
Yeah, so we also shot video footage underwater. And that's here. That is a big, huge projection of the video work. And normally we don't show them on monitors when it comes to museums exhibition. We show them on large walls and projection. And that's here a museum in Spain where we have shown that that work, which is called Spacewalk.
Okay. And this image here, this is amazing. So how did you manage to get this viewpoint?
Yeah, that became very famous over the time, same like liquid gravity. This artwork is entitled Orbital Ascent, and it shows a rocket launch of an Ariane 5 rocket in French Guiana. In French Guiana is the European space port. So that's right at the equator in South America. And there in the middle of the jungle, once a month, a rocket launches into space. So it's a very unreal and surreal environment and location on the planet. But of course, it's very difficult to photograph rocket launches in a way that they are really unique and special, and that it changes the viewpoint, because normally you are on the ground and then you look up, and I wanted to create a virtual viewpoint that is already also up in the air. So here it's a digital collage of many different sources. We put cameras on the launch pad in bunkers. They were remote control with sound triggers. So parts of that image are shot from a very near perspectives. Then from a distant perspectives are shot the launch with this huge column of smoke. And then the landscape also is the landscape where the rocket launches, but it's shot from different hills and different angles. So it's all put together. And then also we flew with a helicopter over the launch pad and looked down, and that view is inverted, and then it's the sky. So the sky here you see is a look from above down to Earth. So there are different perspectives, different angles, different images that I took, composed together to this digital collage and make the work look like it looks. So again, it looks real at a first glance, but it's a digital composition.
Okay. And this one here, it's not an image that you would necessarily associate with being shot on a Hasselblad. So yeah, tell us a bit more about this one.
Why not?
Wow, yeah, I guess not everyone gets the opportunity, I guess.
Okay. That's true. So that's also shot in French Guiana, and it shows a Russian Soyuz rocket launching into space. And here it's really a very unique shot that I was able to do. I asked the people to install the camera, the H6D, on the launch tower, so that there's a huge gantry which is covering the rocket, and then on the launch day the gantry moves back, and then the rocket stands free and launches. So this is a very tricky, and nobody ever did that before, because it's also kind of safety issue, of course. If the camera or something from the camera falls on the rocket, then I get a real insurance problem. So it was well, at the end of the day, they just said, okay, we do it, because I know the people there and they trusted me. And I was allowed in the morning on the launch, I was allowed to install the camera on the outside of the launch tower at the gantry. But with all the hassle and a very short amount of time that I had to install the camera, I forgot one important thing. I forgot to cover it in case of rain. So, but it was blue sky and there was no rain inside. So I said, maybe okay. But 2 hours later came a tropical thunderstorm. So it was raining cats and dogs, and the camera was hanging outside at the launch tower. So I said, oh, that might be problematic for the launch. During the launch, the sky opened, it was beautiful weather, and I said, maybe the camera worked, and I got my shot. But immediately after the launch, another thunderstorm came with many flashes and massive rain and winds. So I was not allowed to take down the camera the whole day. So it was up there for 5 hours in the massive storm, hanging outside on the tower. And so I was not expecting that I get out any footage of that. At the end of the day, in the early evening, I climbed up the tower when the thunderstorm was gone, and I took the camera was completely wet, and so I dried it up carefully, and I took out the chip, and I couldn't believe it, but there were 4 images on the SD card, and indeed it worked. And it worked with a sound trigger, so the noise of the engines was triggering the camera, the shutter of the camera, and there were 4 images on it, and one is these. So the camera even survived that really very extreme conditions. But I wasn't surprised, I have to say.
Okay, that's very good for us to hear as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one here a little bit more simple in the way it was shot, but yeah.
Yeah, so these are the preparations when you see that the rocket is coming out of the how do you say, of the assembly hall. Yeah.
Yep. And again here, getting very low.
That's again Ariane 5 rocket. That's in France, where they built the Ariane 5 rockets. Where I also got permission to shoot in the manufacturing and the assembly hall. And that is here. I'm lying underneath one of the Ariane 5 engines. Okay, and another example of an installation here. Yeah, that's a brand new artwork which I created early, I think, end of last year, early this year. This shows the probably most interesting and futuristic spot we have on the planet regarding space travel. That's Starbase. So that's the new spaceport that SpaceX and Elon Musk is currently building in Texas near the Mexican border, and there they built the new Starship, and this spaceship is so big and so huge that you really think it's total fiction. It really looks like a movie set for a science fiction, because it's really unbelievable how big these are, and they later will have capacity to take 100 astronauts in the ship. Wow. Okay. So that's really massive, and they're building dozens of these spaceships there. And here you see the construction site. So there's a lot of going on at the moment. And next month they will start with their first orbital launch with that massive spaceship. So that is the technology that will bring us one day to Mars. These are the spaceships which will land on Mars. And what was also a bit surreal, this is a real thing, it's not an artwork. It's not a digital composition here. The spaceport was built in a little village there, and some of the people just refused to leave, and they're still staying in their houses. And the spaceport is now built around all these houses, and they now have flown rockets in their courtyard, standing in their courtyard.
Yeah, not sure what that does for the house price, but yeah.
Well, probably it's increasing every day.
Yeah. Okay, and this is quite an interesting piece. So yeah, tell us a bit more about this one.
Yeah, that's a very important artwork, which is called Serious Anomaly. In 2014, the Virgin Galactic spaceship had a fatal accident during one of their test flight. So the ship went up to 15,000 meters, where it was released from the mothership, and then the feathering system was released. And what happened? It was an explosion, so that the ship just fall apart and was entirely destroyed, and all the wreckage parts fell down to the surface. So that was a massive and a very impactful event to everybody, for Virgin Galactic, of course, for Richard Branson, for all of us, as we are the future astronauts of Virgin Galactic. This was the ship that I was supposed to fly with one day. So it rose a lot of questions. Why did the accident happen? At the end of the day, it came out it was a mistake of one of the two pilots. So there were two pilots in, and one of them died during the accident. One miraculously survived the accident. It was also a question if the whole program is that really manageable. Will Branson continue with the program? Will he stop it? What is really the level of risk flying with that ship? So many questions came up, and I think it was also very important milestone in the program. At the end of the day, Branson decided to move on, to move forward, to build a fleet of 5 ships to improve it technically, and the program went on. But I had to do an artistic work on that, and my first impulse was I have to go there and shoot on the crash site, but that was of course not possible. So what I did, I collected all the footage from the press photographers who were on site, and then with this hundreds of images, I did a recomposition of a very famous and important painting. And I think later we see the painting. Yeah, this is the painting from Caspar David Friedrich. And in art history, this is the symbol for failure and for the loss of hope. And that was the inspiration for me to take this painting as an inspiration source and recreate it with the medium of photography, and recreate it with footage which is based on all this wreckage of a crashed spaceship. I think we have an installation shot here after that. Yeah, so you here to see the final artwork then installed in one of my exhibitions.
Okay. Okay, and what are we seeing in this image?
Here is a very futuristic also idea of how we could maybe travel into space. It's an idea that came up in the 1970s, first in the past century, in a book of Arthur C. Clarke, and the idea is a space elevator. Could we have a space elevator to travel into space? Basically, it's not so difficult. We need a geostationary platform which is circulating the Earth, and we need an earthbound platform on the equator, and we have to link these two platforms with a cable, and then we could send up and down payload or astronauts on that elevator, on that cable. So the problem still is how to construct the cable. It has to be very, very strong, but at the same time very, very flexible, and it can be only built by a material which is called carbon nanotubes. So these are possible to build, but only atom by atom for the moment. So we won't really be able to produce a 36,000 kilometer long rope in the near future. But I think for the second part of the century, this technology will come more into focus and could be a possibility. And with the artwork here, I wanted to visualize that idea that with a cable, we connect the surface of the Earth with the space above, with the outer space.
Okay. And some more behind the scenes here. This is the James Webb Telescope, is that right?
Yeah, in 2013, I think, I was allowed to go into one of the clean rooms of NASA, shooting one of the famous James Webb Space Telescope mirrors. In total, these are 18 mirrors, which are assembled together in space. Now, last year, end of last year, the telescope finally launched. It's now orbiting around the moon, and as most of you might know, it's already producing spectacular images from the universe. And this is the artwork here, Golden Mirror, that I have created based on the pictures that I was allowed to take there from the mirror in the clean room. And that's an installation view at the ZKM Museum in Germany.
And yeah, what we've seen in this one.
That's another very unique instrument that humanity built. It's the largest radio telescope on the planet. It's called FAST. That's also the title of the artwork here. And this is installed in China, in southwest part of China, in the middle of nowhere, in a huge valley. They installed this massive telescope, which has a diameter of 500 meters. So it's 500 meters wide. And the goal of this instrument is to find extraterrestrial communication.
Wow.
But I have to tell, and we have to go. Oh, I can tell it here also. There's a little story behind this. This artwork would not exist without Hasselblad. Why? Because when I went there, it was very, very difficult to access and to get permission. Finally, I was allowed to climb up a hill and to shoot this. But I was before I was aware of the fact that it was all blocked for electromagnetic signals. So no cell phones, no digital cameras. So the H6D stayed home, and I took my old 500 cm Hasselblad from my student times with the 6x6 film rolls to the location there. And then the security guy who checked my camera was obviously a photographer, and he was so overwhelmed by the camera that when he saw that, and then he said, "Oh wow, that's a Hasselblad, an old Hasselblad," and he knew that there's no electronic in; it's all manual. So, yeah. And then he decided, okay. You got 4 hours, you're allowed to climb up the hill, you can take your pictures, and then you come back. And that's how I got the permission to shoot this this picture.
Yeah, another great story. Yeah, we've been using this image as like the header image for advertising the webinar. So yeah, what we've seen in this.
That's entitled Space Simulator. No, the artwork is entitled Simulacrum, and it's a space simulator. What we see here, that's in the Netherlands at the ESTEC Test Center, also part of ESA, the European Space Agency, and that's a very interesting chamber where they test materials before they're sent to space, because materials in space have to cope with the fact that it's all vacuum, and that they have extreme temperature difference. So it's very cold on the shadow side, like for satellites, and it's very hot on the sun side. And here, this image shows that specific chamber, which can produce or replicate the vacuum conditions of space, and also produce enormous temperature on one side and very low temperatures on the other side to test these materials.
Okay, and we've got a question from Peter actually on this particular image. He's asking, is it shot up or down?
Yeah, good question. What was so interesting here is the different perspectives that are inside this facility, and the reason for the irritation is there is a huge mirror inside. Maybe you see this little hexagonal structure in the center. If you look above the golden circle, you see a hexagonal structure, many hexagonal patterns, and this is a mirror, and the mirror is 45-degree torsioned, and then there are different tubes going into different directions. So the light is coming off one of these tubes and then reflected by the mirror, and the mirror reflects it straight back to the axis where you are looking. So these are different perspective and spaces combined in one image, not because of the digital collage, but because of that mirror inside that construction. Yeah. And what we did, we placed very carefully the lighting into these tubes to bring them all in this reflection and to combine all these different perspectives in one image. I hope that explains the question.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, then moving on. Tell us about this as a composition.
Yeah, this artwork is entitled Lunar Explorers, and for the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing, I wanted to create a specific artwork. And as you might all know, that all the astronauts on the moon were there with their Hasselblad cameras. So all the footage that we have from the moon surface is taken with Hasselblad cameras specifically developed for that endeavor. And I went through the archive of all the Apollo negatives, which are about 4,000 images, and based on these images I made a selection to create a lunar surface, which is what you see here, which is an artificial composition but based on real shots from the moon surface. And then I placed all the 12 astronauts together on the moon surface, the 12 who set foot on the surface of the moon during the 6 moon landings. And they all are working and conducting scientific experiments.
Wow. Okay. So, the robot in this one.
Yeah. So here, this artwork entitled Starbot shows a very intelligent and autonomous human robot, which NASA developed and which is currently under further development in Edinburgh at the Center for Robotics. And this one gets programmed with the purpose to be sent to Mars one day and prepare the first settlements that we will build on Mars, and then also later collaborate with the astronauts on the surface. And I was allowed to shoot also in the laboratory there this robot.
Okay. So just coming to the end of your outer space now. So
are we more or less time? Okay, yeah.
yeah, we're doing okay. Yeah, so just wanted to finish on this image.
Yeah. So it's this is a kind of a transition work, which brings us down to the next series. I did one part of the outer space series is dedicated to the topic of terraforming. So terraforming means transforming a hostile environment into a habitable one, or vice versa. We have a habitable one and we are transforming that in an inhabitable environment. And we're discussing that on the example of Mars, to change the atmosphere of Mars, to change the conditions on the surface of Mars to make it habitable. And the same process we are currently applying on Earth with the effect of destroying our Earth. And the glacier melting that we are currently facing is one of the biggest issues that we are facing, because it brings the sea level rise, the sea levels to rise. And it's a massive problem that we are losing our glaciers. And what you see here is shot inside a glacier. So I climbed into a crevasse, and inside this glacier we found a cave, an ice wall, a melting ice wall, a dying ice wall, which traveled over thousands of years over the glacier and now starts to crack, to melt down, to transform from solid ice into liquid water. And it was again shot with different exposures, different depth fields, and then later stitched together on the computer to carve out all these little details and to have the enormous depth which is in the image.
And it's very relevant at the moment, because I understand these stills from a video that was shown at the COP conference at the moment. Is that right?
That's right, but that's another work here. That's a video work, which is entitled Terraforming, which is also part of the Outer Space series, but already kind of a bridging work to the new series. And this video artwork is all about terraforming and going from solid ice to liquid ice, which is water, and from water to steam. And that process is what we are also facing at the moment on the planet, terraforming, due to the massive CO2 emissions that we are producing and which we are setting into the atmosphere. And this video is currently being displayed at the climate conference in Egypt.
Okay, so let's move on to Cool Earth as the second half of the webinar. So a little bit more recent. It was only started last year and is still ongoing. Yeah, so tell us a little bit more background on this.
So, as already said, with the Outer Space series, I learned it's very important not only to look up into space, it's also very important to look down from space on our planet. And the massive issues that we are facing now with climate change and the transformation of our planet wouldn't be understandable and measurable without the satellite observations of the surface that we have installed in space. And the new series now is entitled Cool Earth and deals with our planetary future in terms of climate change, and especially the role that new climate technologies play. It addresses the ecological, economic, and the cultural impact of human-induced climate change, which is also leading to a redefinition of the relationship between humans and nature. So the artworks that I have created so far, they span the arc from a looming dystopian future, which already has arrived in the present, to a technology-based post-fossil world that requires also a redefinition of the human-nature relationship.
Okay, and you're showing your bravery again in this image.
Yeah, it's well, I started with the topic of volcanoes when I started with the series, because volcanoes play a vital and important role in climate change, and they have specific abilities which we can learn from how to cool Earth down. For example, volcanoes are catapulting sulfur particles into the stratosphere. We know that from historical eruptions that these particles, aerosols, which are then catapulted into the stratosphere, are reflecting the sunlight back. And so they change Earth albedo. That means the amount of sun beams that come in and that reach the surface or are reflected back into space. So that's one important part that volcanoes play, and scientists now are discussing the idea of reproducing that process artificially and putting this kind of particles in the stratosphere to cool Earth down. So when I started with the series, I got the information that, or I read in the internet, that a massive volcano broke out in Iceland, and that was just in the middle of the lockdown period, so everybody stayed home and was locked down. But when I saw when I read that and I saw some images, I said I have to go there and shoot there. So I got a ticket, and somehow I was able to go in a plane, and I flew to Iceland. I was probably the only visitor in Iceland at that times, and then I had just had my camera and a backpack, and I climbed up the mountains, I climbed up the hills, and then I approached this massive eruption, and I shot images from different angles, from different spots. And again, what you see here, this artwork, this triptych, which is entitled Eruption, is a composition, a digital composition of hundreds of different images that I shot on the eruption site.
Okay, and then from heat to cold.
Yeah, in total, I spent about 2 weeks in Iceland for catching all the material for the volcano piece, and that says my time is over. With a little bit more. And then in spring this year, I traveled into the Arctic. And because the Arctic is the hot spot of climate change, the temperatures are rising up 3 times faster in the Arctic than in the rest of the world. The ice is melting, glaciers are melting, sea ice is melting, and what we see in the Arctic now is a blueprint for what we have to expect on the rest of the planet. And what's happening there is massively affecting our weather patterns and what's happening especially in the northern hemisphere on the planet. So I traveled up with an maybe you go back to the first one that we can.
This one?
Yeah, here. So I traveled up with an expedition, a research ship, an expedition ship. So it's a very small vessel. That was organized with some friends from Secret Atlas. They organized this expedition, and we were about 10 photographers on the boat, and we traveled up the whole west coast of Svalbard until we reached the pack ice of the North Pole. And you can see me there standing up on that gantry, taking pictures with my Hasselblad. And yeah, so all the footage then, with what I gathered, is whether done from that ship or from Zodiacs that we use then to go into the pack ice. Okay, then we can go to the one you have shown now. This artwork is entitled Arctic Elegy, and it's shot during midnight. So it's in the Arctic, in the summer in the Arctic, you have 24 hours light. So it's the midnight sun that brings that very surrealistic lighting situation. And it was shot in the middle of a snowstorm. So we went with the Zodiacs to a massive a glacier coast there, very up in the north of Svalbard, and then suddenly parts of that glacier started to collapse, to calve. So that was also quite dangerous. I was going with the boat for hours and hours along this glacier wall, and I took again a lot of pictures from the breakdown of the glacier, and then these images are composed together in one image, what you see here. And this shows how unstable the system became. Everything now is near a breakdown, so a stable system now is near a collapse, and that's really it's very frightening when you see that with your own eyes, what is happening in the Arctic.
And in terms of technically for the camera, shooting in such extreme conditions, is there any issues or any particular way you have to work for that?
The camera worked perfectly, I have to say. So there were no issues with the temperatures, the extreme temperatures that we had to face, the humidity, what is also there. So that all worked perfectly. I was super happy that the Hasselblad was absolutely reliable also under these extreme conditions. The problems are the gloves. You need gloves that which I don't know if we have no, I don't know if we have that behind the scene footage, but specific gloves that you can open, which allows you to press the button on the camera to use the camera without taking off the whole glove because it's too cold.
Right. Yeah.
So that's something that I had to figure out what kind of glove I could use to manage the camera. But usually at the H6D, the buttons are big, so it's easy also to use them with the camera with gloves.
Yeah.
So one dramatic thing that we are facing in the Arctic is that we are losing the sea ice. It's melting down. Sea ice is important because it reflects the sunlight back into space and keeps our global temperature stable. If we lose the sea ice, temperature rises. And there's an interesting concept by producing artificial sea ice and bringing that up from the depth of the ocean and refreeze it on the surface. And I was very intrigued by that concept. And what you see here in that image, which is called polar amplification, shows the process that maybe one day we might need to restore the Arctic ice by such a process.
Yeah.
Rising seas addresses the topic of sea level rise and the probable loss of our coastal civilization. So if glaciers continue to melt down like they are, and the global temperature goes up, sea level rises and is really threatening all our coastal cities. And here the artwork with the mountains that you see here are modified in a way that they show the development of the global, the rise of the global temperature from 1850. That starts on the left side of the image, and then the curve goes on the right side goes up, and that's where we are now. When the temperatures rise, we are 1.2 now, and the very end of the right side, where the mountain ends, is 4 degrees of temperature rise. If that happens, we will lose all our coastal cities.
Yeah. Yeah, we started with this image as the title slide.
Stratospheric injection refers to that idea, what I told you before. The Earth is heating up too much. The biggest problem we have is the heat and the rising of the temperatures. And one thing that we could use is the volcano technique of bringing particles in the stratosphere to reflect the sunlight back. And this is actually the volcano where I shot also the other images that you have seen before. And this is where I was walking during the night, totally alone towards the crater and the eruption side. That was really, I spent the whole night up there on the eruption side. That was really a very unique experience, I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, so we've reached the hour. Are you okay to continue for another 10 minutes or so to go through some of the last images? Is that good?
If the audience goes with me, yes, of course.
Okay, yeah, so we've just got a few images before we get to the end.
A few images which we could talk about. So this is about the idea of producing artificial rain, and that's a technology that is currently developed in Dubai, in the Emirates, and there they develop drones which they send into the clouds, and these drones are emitting electrical impulses, and these impulses are densifying the droplets, and then the droplets get bigger and heavier, and then they fall down as rain. And that's something that they experienced last summer in Dubai. For one day, it was raining cats and dogs, and everything was flooded in the city of Dubai, and all due to artificially produced rain. And that's a very interesting technology that we could use in several dry areas on the planet. And to visualize that, I photographed the desert of the Emirates, or the desert behind Dubai, and I took pictures of the skyline. And so the digital composition shows the dry area, the urbanization, the metropolis of Dubai, and what's happening in the clouds and to produce artificial rain. This artwork is entitled Silk Leaves. Very interesting concept developed by a British scientists. And the idea is to reproduce the most important technology that nature developed, and that's photosynthesis. So photosynthesis absorbs air and absorbs or transforms the CO2, which is in the air, into oxygen and sugar. And this process is, without this process, we would not exist on the planet, and the planet would not look like it looks today. And the scientist is copying this process by producing artificial leaves. And these exist in reality, but in a very small scale. So they're just like the palm of a hand big. And I took that design and that idea, and we recreated that digitally with 3D renderings to produce a larger scale and put them into the landscape, because that's what we need in the future. We need to scale this idea and see all over the world, in the landscape, in the cities, these kind of artificial trees and artificial leaves, which helps us to absorb the CO2 from the atmosphere.
And are these the drones that you were mentioning on one of the previous images?
No, this is a whole different technology.
Oh, okay.
These are future windmills. So these are producing energy based on wind capturing. Today we have this classical windmill standing on the ground with the blades rotating, but that's a very limited technology, because we have way more winds higher up in the air. And MIT in the US developed a project with helium-filled windmills, and they will then be released on a cable. They will go up in the air and catch the wind where most of the winds are, and then produce electricity. So the electricity then runs down on a cable and a storage device which is on the ground, and from there then distributed into the electricity network. And I was very much intrigued by that idea, and what we see here is precisely their design, but already scaled and kind of in function in a landscape. It is still, or is yet, on the status of a prototype, so it's not existing in reality yet.
Okay, and then just the last image of the Cool Earth project that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so the previous image you have seen, they all dedicate to ideas of new technologies that we need to counteract the impact of climate change. This topic is entitled geoengineering. It's a very controversial topic. If we should do that, if we should apply these technologies, basically it's about absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere, getting rid of the CO2. That's something that we need to do. It's not enough just to stop emissions and to go to zero emissions. We need negative emissions. That means we need to absorb them. And the other part is the solar radiation management, which is about changing the reflective balance of the Earth to cool it down. These technologies, we might need them one day to counteract the impact of climate the impact of climate change. However, it also could happen that all this will come too late. So the acceleration of climate change is dramatic, it's massive. Politics the politics is not acting in no way, the economy is not acting in no way really to take the drastic and maybe also dramatic measures that we need to take to prevent the planet from massive transformation and maybe also from extinction of our civilization. And this artwork here, which is entitled Post-Human Waves, pictures a world, a planet, pictures the Earth in a future where human beings might no longer exist on the planet because we have destroyed everything and the conditions of the planet are not any longer suitable for biological or human life. Other life forms like machine life forms might be able to survive, but humans maybe not. So this is a rather dystopian look into the future, which is also a realistic one, because it's really important that we take action now regarding all the dangers we are facing with the dramatic climate change. And as an artist, I have to say, what I as a last word maybe, what I want to do, I want to bring these new ideas, these new technologies, these scientific facts, I want to bring them into discussion to explain what's going on, what's happening, what we have to look at. And I think art and photography is a very good medium to encourage the process of discussion and reflection on that topic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and your images are certainly very powerful in helping to hopefully drive action to at least slow this down and hopefully reverse it. So yeah. Okay, so that's brought us to the end of the Cool Earth project. Just one last thing to tell everyone on this. You're due to have an exhibition starting on the 26th of this month. So if you're local to Italy, you're able to go along and see prints and exhibits from the series there. Will you be there yourself, Michael, at all? Or?
I will. I will fly next week to Italy, and we will start the installation at my gallery there, Studio La Città. So it will be a huge, sort of by far the hugest exhibition with the new series now, with about 15 or 16 very large scale pieces that we are showing there, including video installation. The show will run for about a month and a half, and this will be the first really comprehensive presentation of the new Cool Earth series. I will be there for the opening, so who is nearby is invited to join us, of course, for the opening, or have a look at the exhibition over the coming weeks and month.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully some people will be able to make it along from this webinar. Yeah, so thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for your time and for letting us have lots of stories and behind the scenes access to yourself and your work. Yeah, what's the future for you? Do you plan to continue with either the projects, or do you have new projects coming up?
Yeah, well, I continue to work with both projects. So the outer space series continues. So hopefully then with my upcoming space flight, I will go back to Starbase to shoot the orbital launch of the first orbital launch of Starship. I will go for the next upcoming test flight for Virgin Galactic to shoot pictures there from the spaceship that I will fly one day. And I will, for the Cool Earth projects, there are a lot of shootings planned for next year. The most complicated expeditions to plan, but probably also the most interesting, probably is one goes to Greenland to shoot there the ice cap, or the melting ice cap of Greenland. And I'm planning an expedition into the Amazon forest in Brazil to work there. As we all know, the Amazons are so important for our world, and if we destroy them, in a way that we have done in the past years, it could really happen that the Amazon forests go to a turning point, that they change into a dry area instead of a rainforest, and that would have massive consequences to the climate. But not everything is so negative. There are a lot of very interesting scientific and research projects also for planting new trees, for reforestation of the Amazon, and restore the damage that has been done to the forest. And I'm very much interested in these new project of restoration of the Amazon forest.
Yeah, well, I very much look forward to keeping in touch with you as you work through that, and obviously hopefully move towards your space flight. Yeah, so
I hope that I will be allowed to take my Hasselblad to the space flight. That's not clear yet because it's very heavy, but maybe with the H4D, which is a little bit smaller and not so heavy, there's a better chance to bring that up to space with me.
Yes, that would be very good if possible. So yes, we'll have to look to work on that. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And just before I say, thank you. Just before we say goodbye completely, as usual, just to ask for your help in, you should have a webinar feedback form open up when you exit the webinar. If you're able just to spare a minute to fill that in for us, it's great to be able to get your feedback, see what we're doing good, see what we're not doing so good, and what topics and that you would like covered in the future. So that's very helpful.
Better.
Yeah. And another reminder that the webinar has been recorded, so we hope to post up on the Hasselblad YouTube page within a couple of days, and you will get a direct link to that as part of the thank you email that Hasselblad will send following the webinar. And of course, for anything Hasselblad, you can go to hasselblad.com. On there, we've got everything about our future events and webinars. Of course, all of information on our products, our partner network around the world, lots of inspirational stories from the likes of Michael, and lots on our history. And you can also request a demo on some products, and also request any support that you may need. So thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you again on the next webinar. Thank you very much.